Welcome back. So we're now in phase 2 of our Efficient Frontier project. In our last phase, we collected stock prices and returns for 4 different companies over the last 5 years. In phase 2, we're going to calculate the average return, daily and annualized. We're going to calculate the standard deviation of these returns, daily and annualized. We're also going to calculate the correlation of all 4 of these stocks with one another, and then use that information to calculate the covariance. All right, so we're going to start with the mean return over the 5-year sample. All right, so in Excel, this is just going to be our equals average function. Okay, we're going to take the average of all Amazon returns over the last 5 years. Okay, so I'm going to use the Control-Shift-Down arrows, and that's going to select all of these returns, cell B3 through B1259. All right, close my parenthesis, and we see that on average, Amazon has returned 0.14% per day over the last 4 years. All right, so I can, rather than repeating this for the next 3 stocks, I can just drag this over using the arrow down here. This is a good time to stop and remind you, if you do have a mouse that you can use rather than using a finger pad on the laptop, this is a great time to pull that out and use that. Okay, so now that we've calculated our daily returns, let's also calculate our daily standard deviation. Okay, so this is in Excel, equals STDEV. All right, in the older version of Excel, we can use the STDEV function. That'll work just fine here. We could also do a .s, since we are technically taking a sample standard deviation. Okay, open the parentheses, and we're getting this for Amazon, so I'm going to select those same cells, B3 down through B1259, close my parentheses. Okay, and I'm going to drag that over for the next 3 stocks. We see that we have almost a 2% daily standard deviation for Amazon, 1.4 for Chase, 1% for Walmart, and upwards of 4% for Chesapeake. So this makes sense if you think about the industry they're in. Chesapeake's in oil, Walmart's retail, pretty much a consumer staple. JP Morgan is financials, and Amazon is tech with a mix of retail. Okay, so now I want to stop and think a minute about how to go from a daily return to an annual return. Okay, so in class we've talked about this. We're needing to multiply our returns out linearly. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the daily return by how many days we have in a year. Rather than 365, I'm going to use 252 days, since there are 252 trading days in a calendar year. All right. Likewise, for standard deviation, I'm going to multiply it by 252, but I can't just use 252 linearly. Okay, since we're technically multiplying the variance by 252, all right, then we need to multiply the daily standard deviation by the square root, all right, SQRT of 252. All right, now you can drag those over for both the annual return and the annual standard deviation, and we'll see that Amazon has about a 34% annual return. All right, that's very huge, but over the last 5 years they've experienced a lot of growth. All right, Chesapeake, on the other hand, has actually lost a little bit over the last 5 years, which makes sense with the oil downturn. Right, standard deviations, we'll see that, like we saw with the daily, all right, Chesapeake is going to be much more volatile than the others, Walmart much less so. Okay, now a little bit of Excel handiwork comes into play when we're calculating the correlations of all of these stocks. Ultimately, we're going to be calculating the variance and standard deviation of our entire portfolio. All right, we do know from previous, let me open the file here. We do know from, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the file. All right, we do know from from class that the standard deviation or variance of a portfolio is going to be equal to the weighted variance, all right, plus the weighted variance of the other stocks in the portfolio, all right, plus weighted covariance terms. Okay, so to get these weighted covariance terms, we're going to need the weights. We'll determine those in phase 3 or 4, but we do need the covariance, right? And to calculate covariance, we need the correlation. Okay, so basically we're going to be calculating this formula for 4 stocks rather than 2, so we need to calculate the correlation of all 4 stocks to one another. Okay, so let's go back to our returns and statistics tab, and now I'm going to simply calculate the correlation of Amazon to Amazon. So this is an easy check. The diagonal of this matrix should equal 1. Okay, so the function in Excel is going to be correl. All right, now I need the 2 arrays. So I'm going to use Amazon, right? Control Shift down. That'll give me the same array that we've used in the returns. And then I'm also going to do that same array for the second company, right? And I'll get a correlation of 1. All right, here's the tricky part. When I drag this down, right, it's also going to move this return array down. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to go ahead and lock all of the row numbers on all of these cells. So when I drag these formulas down, that's not going to happen. We could type in all of these arrays manually. It's just going to take a little longer. So I'm going to go ahead and lock all of the row numbers. All right, now when I drag it down, you'll see that we still stay with our array in the correct place, right? And when I drag this across, you'll also see a problem that we're now calculating the correlation of JP Morgan with JP Morgan, with Chase, even though we want to be calculating the correlation of Amazon and Chase, right? So for this first, I'm going to delete this. For this first column, for this first array, I also want to lock in the column letter. All right, so I'm just putting a $sign in front of the B and the 3, also in front of the B and the 1259, and then in the second array, just in front of the numbers. All right, you can also use the F4 key to do this. On a laptop, it's a little more difficult if you have to use the FN key to do that. All right. So now when I drag this over, right, you'll see if I select a random cell here, the Amazon array stayed put, but the Walmart array drug over. All right, so this is exactly what we want for our first row. Okay, when I drag this down to subsequent rows, we're again having the problem of calculating Amazon with JP Morgan. You can do a little more complex coding on your Excel sheet, and you can have this actually move over for every cell that you drag down. I'm not going to get that complex. I'm just going to go ahead and manually change this to column C for this first row. So now I'm doing the same thing as before. Over here, I want to change this to column D. All right, so now I'm calculating the correlation of Amazon and Walmart. Over here, I want to change this to column E. And now I'm calculating the correlation of Amazon and Chesapeake. All right, if you did this correctly, the top row and the first column should be identical, just transposed. All right, and now I can drag this across, and I should be getting 1s along the diagonal, and now you've completed your correlation matrix. You now know the correlation of Chase and Walmart, you know the correlation of Chase and Chesapeake, any of these 4 stocks in combination. All right. Now we want to calculate covariance. Okay. I don't have it written here, but we know from class that covariance is equal to the correlation times the standard deviation of one stock times the standard deviation of another stock. All right. So we need these covariance terms, so when we're calculating our portfolio covariance, right, when we're calculating our portfolio variance, we can use that to calculate our portfolio covariance. Okay, so to do this, we're going to need the standard deviations of all of these stocks, right, in this table, and then we're going to multiply those by the correlation. Right? This isn't going to be as hard as it sounds. I'm just going to reference the annual standard deviation up here. All right? I'm going to do everything in annual terms, so when we get to the end, we have an interpretable portfolio return. Okay? And now I can just drag this on over to the next 4 cells, and I get the Amazon standard deviation, the Chase, the Walmart, and the Chesapeake standard deviation. Okay, I'm going to reference these cells here for the standard deviation column on the left-hand side. Okay, if you have a bigger array, more than just 4 stocks, this can be a little time-consuming because it is a little point-and-click rather than just dragging. Again, if it gets too much, then you can learn a little more Excel coding and actually have it move over for every cell that you move down. We're not going to go that into it. Now I need to calculate the covariance. The covariance matrix is just going to be the covariance of Amazon and Amazon, the covariance of Amazon and Chase, etc. How do I do this? Let's start out with just the Amazon and Chase, just for an example's sake. The covariance is going to equal the standard deviation of Amazon times the standard deviation of Chase times the correlation of Amazon and Chase. Okay, and that's going to give me a covariance of 0.02. Okay, the tricky part here, when I drag this to the left, I don't want this standard deviation column to move. So I'm going to lock in the blue cell, the column letter on the blue cell. So I'm going to lock in this G here with a $sign. Also, when I drag it down, I don't want the row of the standard deviation row to move. So I'm going to lock in the row of the red cell. So I'm going to lock in 17 on this equation. On the purple cell, J10, I want that to free float within this matrix. All right, so when I drag it across this matrix, I also want that purple cell to move anywhere up and down, left and right in this matrix. Okay, so now that I've got that, I can drag that over, and drag it to the right, and I can drag that entire row down. Now you've completed your daily returns, annual returns, daily standard deviation, annual standard deviation, the correlation matrix, and the covariance matrix. Okay, if you did this correctly on your portfolio statistics page, this all should have carried forward. Okay, that's the end of section 2, so I'll see you in section 3, in phase 3.